They don't want you to know this. In the West, the truth about death has been silenced, distorted, or dismissed as superstition. But in ancient Tibet, monks preserved a sacred map, a guide for the soul that begins not when we're alive, but the moment we die. This isn't a myth. For over 1,000 years, Tibetan masters have claimed that the 49 days after death are the most critical in the soul's existence. A time when consciousness passes through visions, gods, demons, karmic illusions, and terrifying reflections of the self. A time when the soul is tested, not by others, but by its own fears, desires, and forgotten truths. These teachings are found in a powerful and mysterious book the world calls the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or Bardo Thödol. In the East, it was once read aloud to the dying to guide their journey. In the West, it's been ignored, hidden, and labeled dangerous. But maybe that's exactly why it was hidden. Because it speaks too clearly. Because it describes what others dare not put into words. We're not here to convince you. We're here to show you what the Tibetan Book of the Dead really says, step by step, day by day, about the soul's mysterious journey after death. What you do with this knowledge is entirely up to you. According to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the moment of death is not the end. It is the beginning of an intense and vivid journey. The very instant a person dies, their consciousness enters what is known as the Chonyid Bardo, or the Bardo of the moment of death. The connection between body and mind is severed, yet the consciousness doesn't disappear. Instead, it hovers in a state of stunned disorientation. For the first 3 days, the soul, or mind stream, remains close to the body. It may still perceive the physical world, hear the voices of loved ones, and even see the rituals being performed. But it does not yet fully realize that death has occurred. This is why, traditionally, the Tibetan Book of the Dead is read aloud beside the deceased. The idea is not to comfort the living, but to guide the dead. The text speaks directly to the consciousness, attempting to awaken it to the reality of its own condition. In these early days, recognition is everything. If the soul can recognize its own state, if it realizes, I have died, it has a chance to respond consciously and navigate the bardos with awareness. Then comes the most powerful moment, the entrance into the Chonyid Bardo, the bardo of the reality experience. This is the phase where the consciousness encounters what is described as the blinding light of the Dharmakaya, the pure, unfiltered brilliance of ultimate truth. In Tibetan understanding, this light is not external. It is the soul's true nature revealed in its rawest form. If the consciousness can withstand the brilliance, accept it without fear, and recognize it as its own essence, it can achieve liberation instantly. No rebirth, no suffering, just complete awakening. But this moment is overwhelming. For most, the light is too much. Fear takes over. The soul recoils and instinctively turns away. This is not a punishment. It is simply a reaction rooted in unawareness. The being clings to familiarity, to identity, to the habits of its former life, and so it misses the gateway to freedom. Now begins a more complex passage. The consciousness shifts into the realm of visionary experiences, a state where it encounters dazzling forms, deities, lights, and sounds. These are the manifestations of the Chonyid Bardo. The Tibetan masters teach that these appearances are not real in the external sense. They are projections of the mind, reflections of the inner landscape, shaped by past actions, emotions, and beliefs. But the soul, still confused, sees them as external forces. It believes these luminous beings to be gods or demons, when in fact, they are aspects of its own consciousness. During the first week, the soul is shown visions of the 5 Buddhas, representing different qualities of enlightened awareness. These visions are meant to serve as opportunities for recognition. Each Buddha appears with a light of a specific color: white, blue, yellow, red, green, and with increasing intensity. But along with these pure lights appear duller lights, flickering, tempting, more comfortable. These represent the path back into the cycle of rebirth. Most souls are drawn to these dim lights, mistaking them for safety. The pure lights, too intense, are misunderstood as threatening. This entire phase is not a test from above, but a mirror. What the soul sees is itself, its fears, its wisdom, its unresolved karma. And the choices it makes here are not choices in the conventional sense, but responses, driven by recognition or confusion. The more the soul understands what it is seeing, the more it can navigate the experience with clarity. The tragedy, the texts say, is not that the soul is judged, but that it judges itself, misperceives the signs, and falls into fear. And so, even with the doors to liberation wide open, most beings turn away. Not because they are evil or unworthy, but because they simply do not realize. The first week is thus both the most radiant and the most fragile. The teachings emphasize again and again, if you recognize the truth, even now, you can be free. The guides who read the text do so with urgency, reminding the soul over and over, this is your chance. Recognize the lights, know your mind, fear nothing, but the window is narrow. After this week, the soul begins to move deeper into the Bardos, where karmic forces take stronger hold, and the journey becomes more difficult to reverse. This is just the beginning. But already the soul stands at the threshold, offered a path beyond suffering, beyond illusion, beyond self. What happens next depends entirely on what the soul is able to see. As the soul moves deeper into the Bardos, the intensity of experience begins to shift. From the 8th to the 14th day after death, the mind stream enters a phase known in Tibetan teachings as the appearance of the wrathful deities. But despite their terrifying forms, these beings are not demons. In fact, according to the Bardo Thödol, they are the very same Buddhas that appeared in peaceful form during the first week. Only now, they reveal a different face. This second week presents a new challenge, one rooted not in beauty, but in fear. These wrathful figures, terrifying in color, sound, and energy, are not external monsters. They are, once again, projections of the soul's own consciousness. Each wrathful deity embodies a specific mental force, primal energy, wisdom, destruction of ignorance. They hold weapons, emit roars, and stand amidst flames and storm clouds. But they are not evil. The teachings are clear. They are transformative archetypes, meant to dissolve attachments, shatter illusions, and awaken the soul to its deeper nature. Still, to the unprepared soul, they are terrifying. The light is no longer soft, the forms no longer gentle. If the consciousness has not recognized the truth in the first week, then the raw power of these figures may only reinforce fear. And fear leads to misperception. The soul, seeing terror instead of wisdom, begins to turn away, deeper into confusion, further from liberation. But the opportunity is not gone. Each of these wrathful deities also presents a path to awakening. They confront the soul with its own unresolved emotions, anger, jealousy, pride, guilt, and show them in symbolic, sometimes nightmarish form. In Tibetan thought, this confrontation is necessary. If the soul can see that it is not being punished, but being shown itself, it can awaken in that very moment. Each roar is a call to clarity, each flame a burning away of false identity. During this phase, the Bardo Thödol describes overwhelming sounds, thunderclaps, howling winds, crashes of cosmic disintegration. These, too, are not literal. They are the echoes of the personality breaking apart. The soul is undergoing what we might call a psychic dissolution, a process where the self-image built during life begins to collapse. All identities, roles, stories, everything the soul clung to as Sme, begins to crumble. For those attached to ego, it is frightening. But for those who let go, it becomes liberation. The second week is also the time when karmic imprints begin to rise. Tibetan masters teach that every action, word, and thought leaves a subtle trace, a pattern etched into the consciousness. These imprints do not disappear with death. Instead, they begin to resurface, not as memories, but as experiential visions. One might witness scenes from life, symbolic judgments, emotional reckonings. This is not a courtroom. There is no external judge. But the soul sees what it has done, and more importantly, how those actions shaped its mind. Here too the soul has a choice, though not always a conscious one. If it can recognize that these terrifying visions are not enemies, but mirrors, it can still awaken. The Bardo Thödol pleads with the soul. These are not others, they are you. Do not be afraid. But again, recognition depends on prior training, clarity, and letting go. For most, the karmic forces become overwhelming. The illusions seem too real, and the soul begins to drift toward the next Bardo, where the seeds of rebirth start to take root. But not all is lost. Tibetan teachers emphasize that even at this stage, a sudden moment of realization can bring release. The wrathful deities, with all their thunder and flame, are not here to destroy, but to awaken. Each terrifying image is a chance, a mirror, a lesson, and within each lesson the same invitation remains. Recognize, let go, awaken. By the end of the second week, the journey grows darker, not because it is evil, but because the light of recognition fades as fear grows stronger. Yet even now, the path of liberation has not been closed. It is simply more difficult to see. Around the 15th day after death, according to the Bardo Thödol, a profound shift takes place. The soul, or more precisely, the stream of consciousness, enters what is called the Bardo of becoming. This is no longer the realm of blinding light or archetypal visions. The dramatic encounter with peaceful and wrathful deities fades. What arises instead is a subtle, wandering state, one that feels strangely like life, but with no body to inhabit, and no world that fully responds. In this Bardo, the soul becomes agile, weightless. It can move swiftly through space, witnessing places it once knew, people it once loved, but it cannot make contact. It can see, but not be seen. This can lead to deep sorrow, especially for those whose attachments to the living world remain strong. According to Tibetan teachings, the consciousness at this stage is still influenced by desire, confusion, and memory. It clings, it searches, it longs, but it cannot settle. One of the most mysterious elements of this phase is the emergence of visions related to conception. The Bardo Thödol describes how the soul begins to experience symbolic or actual scenes of sexual union. These visions are not erotic in nature. They are preparations for rebirth. The consciousness, drawn by karmic winds and emotional tendencies, is instinctively pulled toward potential parents. Depending on the strength of these imprints, it may feel an overwhelming urge to enter into the womb. And yet, even here, there is still a choice, though subtle. If the soul recognizes that these visions are part of the illusion, that it is being drawn by old patterns, it may still achieve liberation. But for most, this insight slips away. The pull of karma is too strong. The yearning for form, for identity, for another chance becomes irresistible. The moment of conception, at least symbolically, becomes a gateway. Once passed through, the next life begins to take shape. The Bardo Thödol explains that the consciousness in this phase begins to intuitively select the conditions of its next existence. This is not a conscious choosing, like browsing a menu. It is more like water finding its own level. The vibrational patterns of the soul, its fears, desires, unresolved emotions, and merits naturally draw it toward a womb, a family, a destiny that resonates with those patterns. In this way, birth is not random, it is karmic. But this stage is not just passive drifting. Tibetan tradition holds that during the bardo of becoming, the soul is highly sensitive, perhaps more than at any other point. It can hear the prayers of the living. It can sense guidance, compassion, and intention from those still on earth. This is why, for centuries, Tibetan monks and family members recited the Bardo Thödol to the dead for up to 49 days. The belief is not that words bring salvation, but that recognition brings freedom. And sometimes, a single phrase spoken with clarity and love can help the soul awaken. As the third week progresses, the window begins to close. The visions of rebirth become more frequent. The pull toward form, identity, and matter becomes stronger. If liberation hasn't occurred in the previous bardos, then rebirth becomes increasingly likely, almost inevitable. Some may feel comfort in this. Others may experience sorrow. But in the Tibetan view, even rebirth is not punishment. It is simply the continuation of the journey until one day recognition dawns. The bardo of becoming is not as dramatic as the previous stages. It has no gods, no blinding lights, no cosmic sounds. It is a drifting state, quiet, shadowy. But in its silence lies a final invitation. Even at the threshold of new life, awareness is possible. Even as the soul leans toward a new form, the door remains slightly open. And for those with clarity, even then, freedom is within reach. As the 49-day journey nears its end, the soul, or consciousness, enters its final and most decisive phase. According to the Bardo Thödol, the days from the 40th to the 49th are a time of transition when the possibilities narrow and the final outcome begins to solidify. If liberation has not yet occurred, if the soul has not recognized the visions for what they truly are, if it has not detached from desire, illusion, and fear, then the force of karma begins to take over. But this is not described as a punishment. In Tibetan thought, rebirth is not condemnation. It is simply the continuation of learning. In these final days, the visions that the soul experiences are no longer abstract or archetypal. They become specific. Clear images of potential futures begin to form, not symbolic, but personal. The soul is drawn toward a particular family, a particular womb, a particular form of life. This pull is not forced. It emerges naturally from the accumulated tendencies of the consciousness. What the soul fears, longs for, resists, or clings to, these patterns shape what it is drawn to become. For some, the pull is toward human rebirth, perhaps under conditions that echo unfinished lessons from the previous life. For others, depending on the weight of their actions and attachments, rebirth may come in a non-human form, animal, spirit, or even more subtle realms. These ideas reflect a worldview in which life takes many shapes, and consciousness evolves across countless lifetimes. In this vision, identity is fluid, not fixed. Growth can happen through both joy and suffering. But not all outcomes lead to rebirth. According to the teachings, a soul that has prepared deeply, or one that suddenly awakens in the Bardo to the illusory nature of its visions, still has the chance, even in these final days, to attain liberation. Such a consciousness would not be pulled toward form, but would dissolve into the clarity of awareness itself. This state is often described as a merging with pure light, or the realization of one's original nature. In the Tibetan view, this is not extinction. It is freedom. These last days are also when the veil of forgetting begins to lower. As the soul edges closer to its next birth, the memories of the previous life begin to fade. This forgetting is described not as an act of cruelty, but as part of the necessary process. To fully inhabit a new form, the soul must leave behind its old identity. It must let go of the stories, the names, the attachments. What remains is the deeper imprint, the karmic seeds that carry into the next incarnation. And so the wheel turns again. For Tibetan Buddhists, this cycle, known as samsara, is not eternal damnation, but a vast classroom. Each life is a chance, each death a mirror, each bardo a doorway. And while few may achieve liberation in a single journey, the teachings insist that the path is always open. There is always another moment of clarity, another opportunity to awaken. This is why, in Tibetan tradition, the Bardo Thödol was not just a book to read. It was a guide to be lived. Its words were meant to be spoken aloud, not only to the dying, but to the dead, because the soul might still hear, still see, still choose. Even in the final hour, change is possible. As the 49th day ends, the soul either dissolves into light or is reborn into form. The journey is complete, or it continues. Either way, what lies beyond death is not silence. It is motion, possibility, and meaning. The ancient Tibetan masters left us a map, not to declare truth, but to invite reflection, not to promise, but to prepare. And perhaps in reading their words, we find not fear, but a deeper understanding of what it means to live, to die, and to pass between. Dear friends, have you heard any stories that confirm or refute the ideas from the Tibetan Book of the Dead? Share it in the comments. If you liked this video, please like it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.